Okay, so we have already configured this communication between Firebase and our Azure Notification Hub. It is time for us to do something very similar, but when it comes to the Apple Push Notification Service, which is actually what APNS stands for, the thing that we see right here. And in this case, we have two options. We can either set this authentication, this communication through a certificate or through a token. Spoiler alert, we're going to be using a certificate throughout this lecture. So the first thing that we need to do is actually start over on Visual Studio. And over on our application, the first thing that I want to make sure of is that in the entitlements.plist file, I navigate over to entitlements right here at the bottom. And I make sure that I enable push notifications. So just make sure that this is enabled. This is pretty much for our application, internal to our application, but it's definitely necessary. Now, the next thing that we need is navigate over to the certificates, identifiers, and profiles in the developer console for Apple. In here, if you remember, we already have registered the identifier for our application. So the one that we found over on the info.plist file, we have this bundle identifier, and we have already used that to register the LPA Finance app in my case. So I see the identifier right here. So if we select this one again, this was already created. We are not creating another one right now. We are using one that was already there. But we are going to notice that in the capabilities, there is push notifications option and it is currently disabled. So of course we have to enable this and we have to configure it. Now in here, we're going to need a couple of certificates. A development certificate when we're developing the application. And of course, once we publish the application, we're going to need the production certificate. So because eventually I do want to publish this application, I am going to be creating both of them. Let's start with the development certificate. And by the way, first I have to make sure that I save this new push notification configuration. So that is added to my identifier. So let me go back to that identifier, navigate back down to push notifications, click on configure and start creating that certificate for development. Of course, the platform is iOS. And the first thing that we're going to need is this CSR file that we absolutely need to create directly from a Mac computer. So yes, this step is going to absolutely require a Mac computer. You can borrow one to create this CSR file, but it is important then that you navigate over to the Keychain Access, this application that is of course installed with your Mac. Now all the way at the top left corner, you're going to find the Keychain Access menu. You will have to select Certificate Assistant and request a certificate from a certificate authority. This one is going to create that CSR file. So what you have to do is select here Save to Disk, click on Continue, and select where this is going to be saved. Notice that this is a Cert Signing Request file, a CSR file. I am going to be saving this to my desktop right now. So I click on Save, click on Done, navigate back to the certificates, identifiers, and profiles, and upload that CSR file that is inside of my desktop. And click on Continue. That's it. We have created this new certificate. Now, I do recommend that you download the certificate and open it. And immediately after that, identify what certificate that is. You're going to most likely be able to identify it through the expiration date because it is 1 year from today. So today it is June 12, 2020. That means that this expires in June 12, 2021. It's the easiest way to identify this one because the names can be quite confusing and they all look very similar. So just identify it. And what you can do already is expand this file, select the key and make sure that both items are selected, both the certificate and the private key by holding Command on your keyboard. Right-click on the selection and export the two items. This is going to be needed over on Azure, not yet right here on the Apple Developer Portal, but we do need it eventually, so we may as well create this already. And as you will notice, this is a P12 file. So make sure that you know where you're saving this file. I'm going to click on save. Optionally, you can set a password. If you don't want to set a password, you can just click on OK. This is not the password for the actual certificate. This is just for me to grant access to the keychain access. But now over on my computer, I have a P12 file. Remember that, keep that in mind. We're not yet going to be using it, but we do already have that one. So there it is. We have created that certificate in here. Now, if we navigate over to identifiers again, find our identifier, navigate down, we should see that for the push notification capability, we now have one certificate. And we can actually click on edit and see this new development certificate that is already linked to this app ID. And we can do exactly the same thing for the production certificate. I am going to be uploading the same CSR file that I have created earlier. Of course, this time it is going to be a distribution certificate, the one that is created. So I can also click on download, also select it. It is also going to open this keychain access window. And of course, we can do the exact same thing. We can expand this new certificate, make sure that we select it along with its private key, right click, export it to items. I am going to be calling this one production to make sure that I know which is which. This is still a P12 file. Click on save. I still won't be setting a password for this file. And that's it. Now, finally, if we navigate back to our app ID and navigate down to the push notification capability, we now see that it does have both certificates already linked. So excellent. Everything that we needed right here is done. The last thing that we need is navigate back to our notification hub. And in here, we have to upload a certificate. And you may already know that the file that we have to upload is that P12 file that we now have on our computer. Now, what we can do, notice, is the application mode in which this is going to be right now. While I publish this application, I want this to be on sandbox mode, which of course means that the certificate that I have to upload is the one that we created for development, not for production. So make sure that you select the correct certificate, click on open, and enter the password in case you set a password for the P12 file. I didn't, so I don't have to enter any password in here. I will just click on save. And there we go. We have successfully configured both the Google and Apple notification services here on our Azure Notification Hub. So now that this connection is established, what we have to do is start coding the functionality so that we can actually send some notification, which actually, notice, you can send a test directly from here from Azure, but of course also receive the notification over on the devices.